both everybody can do it, whether you're online or in person, that will involve some thinking kind of scenarios for you to consider. And then at the, let's say the last 20 minutes, if we still have questions, you can ask them. If there's other scenarios about work settings, work situations that you're interested in, we can handle those as well. So that's my plan. And now I'll give you an opportunity. So what do you want to get out of this session? Anything in particular? It can be specific, it can be general, but please, so those in the room, if you have something, just raise your hand and I'll call on you.
We have a few responses online.
Okay, good.
So
that's great.
A couple of folks learning more about the workplace in general and how people interact.
Okay.
Want to learn more about professionalism, how the workplace works, how to take advantage of different work settings, and best practices to stay on top of your work. Familiarizing yourself with opportunities available for college students and how to take advantage of them. How to best present yourself.
Okay.
Anyone else in the room? Keep going.
That covers a pretty wide range. So like workplace topics, professionalism, how to present yourself. These are things that we'll cover. And if I don't address every one of them, I'll try to come back and ask if anyone still has anything that they're missing. Great. Okay. So let me set the stage for understanding the world of work. In the Career Center, if any of you have been to the Career Center or have had an appointment with a career advisor, you might know that we do things like help with a resume, cover letter, help you prepare for an interview, give you ideas about places to apply, even things like salary negotiation. So maybe you got a job offer and you need to talk through it. Now that's going to be true mostly for graduating students and not most of our current students. But the point is, most of the work that we do in the Career Center has to do with helping you before you get a job. And while that's important, there's something really important too, and that has to do with helping you after you get hired, right? And the reason why this is important, it's always been important, but I'd argue that it's even more important in 2023. There's a few reasons. So let me start with that. I always like to present a few images so that it kind of makes it seem a little bit more concrete. All right. So this first one, I'm going to walk over here just so I get a different perspective on it. Okay. Multiple generations at work. 5 generations working side by side in 2020. Pardon the old slide, but I think it still holds true. Did you realize? Raise your hand if you knew that there are 5 generations working together in the workforce. Anybody? Did anybody know that? I was surprised. Now, it's a little bit unclear, but basically, what we often call Gen Z, right? So these are people who are roughly the age of the people in this room and probably many of the people watching online. The millennials, that's the generation before. Raise your hand if you've heard about the millennials. You heard that term? Yeah, okay. Great. Gen X, guess what? I'm a member of Gen X. So that's, wow, that's like now 3. But then it keeps going. All the older people, even older than me. But boomers. Boomers are the ones like the post, what do you call them? The post-World War II generation. And then even, there's one more, I guess they're still working. They must be pretty old though. That went from like the traditionalists, sometimes called the silent generation. Well, we're mixing, we're kind of like, they're not all exact, the terms, but that one was up until like the end of World War II. So those are people who are like in their late 70s who are still working. So why does this matter? Those of you online and those of you in person. Well, why do you think that, if you have an idea, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. Why does it matter that we need to think about the fact that there's 5 generations in the workplace? Does anybody have any thought on that? Anything come to mind? How about this? Think about technology. Differing experience with technology. Does that help? Anybody online?
Not yet online.
Not yet, okay.
Different generations have different cultures and expectations.
Very good. I love it. Different generations have different cultures and expectations. Thank you, online participant. So, what does that really mean? Well, in one instance, for example, um, my generation, right, the one in the middle, Gen X, when we were starting the workforce, they had computers, but not the way that we have computers today. So a lot of the work we did was with doing things like writing things on paper. Like we did things differently. And so when I noticed that younger people were starting to write their like class notes on computers, I was like, wow, that must be kind of interesting. We didn't have we have a young man over here using his computer. We didn't have that. And it's like it struck me as like, whoa, how would life be different if I had had a computer when I was in college? And it the upshot is it's kind of hard to imagine. So what does that mean for the generations? Sometimes there's like misunderstandings or just a different way of looking at things that can come out and expectations about how things should be done. Um, my generation, again, sometimes complains that younger workers will maybe will send short messages that have a lot of abbreviations in them. You know, that's a common complaint that I think professors have, right? Like writing papers that look like maybe they're text messages. So that's another obvious one. So if we have all these different generations, there's going to be some misunderstandings, and we have to try to understand each other better if we want to be successful in the workplace. All right. Can anyone in the room just shout it out if you what do you see in this slide, or anyone online? I think you could put it in the chat. You see anything? What do you see? Yeah.
Yeah, one person's working in a designated workplace, and the other one is working in a more comfortable area.
Okay, got it. Do you think the other person is maybe working from home?
I mean, literally, they can both be working from home, but
That's true too.
More likely the right way.
Yeah. Okay. So what do we have here? It's the hybrid workplace. Does anyone know anyone? I hope so. I work in a hybrid workplace, but does anyone know someone who does this? Like they work at home and they work, right? Maybe family members. And for these people, did this probably start in March of 2020? In some cases, people were working. I have a neighbor who was working at home like a long time ago, but for many of us, it began in March 2020. Can you think of one thing that is challenging about working hybrid, working both in the office and working at home? Yes. Great. So for those of you who couldn't hear, socializing is difficult because we're not physically with people. Definitely, that's very true. Anything else that's challenging about hybrid? Yes.
At least some people I see who work hybrid, when it's at home, it's harder to know when to turn off the computer and to stop working.
Wow, yeah, at home, it's harder to know when to stop working. And that kind of gets at the work-life balance. You mean they're working really hard? Is that what you're saying? Wow, yeah. Do you think any people have trouble like working hard enough at home? Nobody I know, but it could be, right? That could be a challenge. I think the socialization one is very, very important. And that's going to be a little bit about what we talk about shortly. Great. Any other thoughts? I don't know if anyone online had anything to say about that.
Difficult to delegate tasks. Also, the separation between work and life.
Well, that's good. Difficult to delegate tasks. I hadn't thought of that one, but that is true, right? Now we do have things like Microsoft Teams or Zoom, but those if we're not in a meeting or focused on those things, we still might feel a little bit distanced from other people. Okay, next one, lens. Okay, this might be harder to figure out why I chose this for this session. Are there any photographers in here or online? Anybody like to shoot photos? Not so much. A little bit? Okay. If you can think, not just for our photographer in the back, but any of you here or online, What comes to mind when you think of a lens? Does anything come to mind? I have one thing in particular, but I will wait for you to.
Perspectives. Someone wrote?
Someone said perspectives. Exactly.
Viewpoint.
Viewpoint. We talked a little bit about the 5 generations in the workplace. Everybody's got a different perspective. Some of them are formed by experience, maturity, age. Others by where you grew up, who you grew up with, where you've been, where you've traveled, what you've seen. And so I want to, for this session, I wanted to get us to think about perspective, because I've got to tell you, I've had so many conversations in 2023 with people who have complained about perspectives of other people. How come they do it that way? Why don't they understand that this is a better way to do it? Now, it's not just in the workplace, it's like all in the world. Maybe some of you have seen this too, seen this as well. But this is something that is critical to getting along in the workplace. And as I said earlier, in the second segment of this session, I'm going to give you an opportunity to actually kind of do an activity, so you're not just listening to me, but also to consider what are some of the key things that we need to be thinking about to succeed in the workplace. Some of them have to do with, well, I'll say many of them have to do with a hybrid, distant work situation. My final slide, I think that's my final, my next to last slide is just a word cloud where I've included things like adaptability, improvements, innovation, evolve, improve. I think this is a really important concept in the workplace, is that things are changing so fast. Maybe some of you, anybody raise your hand if you use Chat GPT? I actually did for this presentation, and I'll show you before the end what I used it for particularly. The world of work has changed a lot in the last 3 years, but I have no idea, you have no idea, we have no idea how much more it's going to change as a result of artificial intelligence. Now, we can be scared of that, or we can just be prepared as best we can and think about how are we going to adapt to it. So that's another message for you today. I'll give you my information just so you have it. If you want to follow up, you can email me, charles@american.edu. Best way to connect is on LinkedIn. Just curious, how many people in the room are on LinkedIn? Quite a few of you, great. I'm a big fan. I think it's a really good way of keeping track, remembering people that you meet. You can look at some of our previously recorded webinars on the Career Center YouTube channel. Some of them might be of interest to you. And I'll tell you that in the coming year, we're going to be doing a lot more shorter videos on particular career topics. So keep an eye out for those. At this point, then, I'm going to transition to our little activity. Again, I know that you don't want to listen to me speak for too long. So, oops, sorry. Let's see here. If I can get too many. It's funny, we weren't sure, it wasn't clear how many people were going to be in person and how many people were going to be online. And so we have plenty of copies here. Excellent. All right. So what I'm going to ask you to do, this will require, I hope it's not asking you too much. If you're not sitting right next to someone, could you find someone to like be your partner in the room? And then people online, you can be your own partner. You can just consider the scenarios that I've built. All right. So it's okay if you have like a group of 3 as well, but let's try to, if you don't mind, just try to find somebody. Why don't I go ahead? Should I just go ahead and start reading the scenarios, and we'll take them one at a time. The goal here is to think through a situation and how you might respond to it. Okay. So the first scenario, you've started a new job and are excited to learn and grow in your position. In the first week, you completed a couple of projects requested by your supervisor. Now you are not sure what to do next. What is an effective way to communicate this with your supervisor? So how do you communicate this situation with your supervisor? If you're online, feel free to just chat, put your answer in the chat. For those of you in the room, could I ask you to turn to the person next to you and discuss what might be a logical answer? All right?
Yeah.
Everybody have a chance to come up with one thing? So why don't we, for the benefit of all, let's if any group has one idea that you'd like to share, or each if possible, why don't we do that? Yes.
I would say, just if you know your supervisor. If you have any other additional tasks for you to do.
Okay. So email your supervisor and ask if there's any additional tasks for you to do. What do you think, everybody? That seems reasonable. Can someone think of another way? Okay, so email your supervisor. That would be one way. Yes.
Just talk about it in person.
Talk
So,
in person. Okay. Yeah. Is that better, do you think, or different from emailing?
I feel like an email is just like something you can put out there to really formally and easily transfer information, while a meeting can be more informal and you can talk better about how you did things.
Great.
You actually have a conversation versus like an email chain.
Right. So maybe more of a back and forth in real time. Great. Did anyone else have anything similar, different? Do you guys have the same?
Yeah, we did something similar, like, especially with talking to your supervisor in person, you get an answer right away as well.
Got it. Okay, yeah, I get an answer right away. All right, does that cover it? We don't have to have everybody chiming in, but if you want to, certainly.
And I also put the online chat, so if you want to read any of those as well. They're all similar to what everyone in person is.
Ask the supervisor what is expected. Tell supervisor what you've completed. Ask if any changes need to be made. Ask for feedback. Establish a line of open communication. Express that you would be happy to assist on any new projects. Try my best to anticipate what is needed, find things to do. However, if I absolutely cannot come up with anything, then I would walk to my supervisor's office and kindly ask for a task, recommendation, or lead. Excellent. I think you guys got it completely correct. You've covered all the ground. Now, that first one you might be saying, well, John, that's pretty obvious, right? Like, of course, you're going to communicate with your supervisor. I think, though, the idea, I like that one about open communication. It's important to feel comfortable and able to be in not constant communication, but frequent communication with your supervisor. Let's go to number two. Number two, you're working 2 days from home and 3 days in the office each week. On the days you are in the office, you notice that there are only about 5 people in the large office space. You observe that the other workers often chat and joke together. You feel a bit left out. What would be a good action for you to take? So maybe go ahead and talk amongst your group.
Just talk. Like social. This is really just asking how you make friends. I would make friends.
How would you do this? I would just do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So what if you have a coworker who isn't as outgoing? How would you help bring them in, maybe? Bring them in.
Is it my job to bring them in?
Yes, it is.
What if I just want to do my job?
So then you
It's in
said
your job
you wanted to
description,
make
it's in the
friends.
It's in the job description that I need to make friends.
Yeah.
Not just
Her
invite
words,
them.
not mine.
Huh?
That's an interesting point. Maybe we can do that. All right, I mean, we probably got to the main point here.
My coworkers are weird.
I think I'm gonna go to the, I'm gonna go to the chat first. I believe this is, join in on the conversation to get to know them individually. Go out to lunch or dinner with everyone, get their numbers so I can maintain communication whether I'm in the workplace or not. Because email is too formal. I like that. When we had some downtime, I probably tried to strike up a conversation with some of the other people in the office. Now, those are all good. Does anyone else have anything similar, different in this room? Yes.
Bring some pizza.
Snack is always
That
good.
that could be really good, especially for certain people who, like food, like pizza.
Everyone likes pizza.
That's pretty much true. Now, you were saying something earlier though about like, is it my job? Sorry to call you out, but no, it's a good point though.
It is a good point, yeah.
Is it a new employee, young person's job to make friends with people in the office? Was that what you said? Something like
I
that?
mean, like, maybe I just want to work.
Maybe you just
Yeah.
want to work. I think I understand that sentiment. The reason why it might be helpful though to get to know the other people is if you're just focusing on your work, that's great if all your work is alone or solely on you. But so much in office culture in 2023, people have to work on projects together. So there is a reason for people to try to get to know each other a little bit better, is what I would argue.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I get it. I understand, like, what are you responsible for? And there is, someone said earlier about wanting to know about work culture. Each organization has its own culture and expectations, and some of those fit well with their employees, but some people might not really enjoy that. Did anyone have anything else they wanted to say? No pressure, but if you did, okay. Are we good? Did we cover? Collaboration can be critical for advancement. I like that. That is really true, I would argue too. Okay, let's hop to number 3. I want to get through these relatively quickly. So number 3, because your company has a staffing shortage, you did not receive an orientation to the job. As a result, you have uncertainties about how to do certain tasks. You know you can ask your supervisor, but are hesitant to ask too many questions, and she's so busy. Compounding the challenge, working in a hybrid modality means you do not have easy access to fellow workers. Can you come up with a solution that includes talking to your supervisor and one that does not? One would be what you say to your supervisor, and one would be talking to someone else or doing some other action apart from your supervisor. Okay.
This is one of these.
Perfect.
I really get this.
Do you mind sharing that with you, just since you have experience with that? If you're not comfortable,
Sure,
that's
why
fine.
not?
It's just.
Sure, why not? I think I chose the
I bet
worst
that
seat in
could
the
be
house.
super.
Yeah.
You're right, but everyone can. Yeah. It's true.
I don't know, I just worked as a waiter and then
They kind of just threw you into
they
it.
just kind of threw me in.
Hmm.
Like, only applicable experience I have is McDonald's,
Okay,
but that doesn't work.
for
It's
serving
a
tables.
different pace.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, nothing
That's true.
else.
Here's one response for number 3. contact the supervisor, explaining the situation and asking for a rundown, or asking someone via online or in person. Oh, it moved up. It always does that.
There. This is the top one regarding those
that one.
questions. Yeah.
Regarding those questions. Okay, it took me a while to find that. All right. I think it's fair to be open with your supervisor and email talk with them frankly about how you're very excited to be starting this position, but want to make sure you do the best job you can. Acknowledge that they are likely very busy and that you don't want to overwhelm them, and ask how, when is a good time. I like that answer. Any other answers that people wanted to share? Could I ask that you too? Because I heard you saying it's a good thing.
We were just saying that like you can give them a list of options. Like if you present them with solutions instead of just asking a broad question, it's going to be a lot easier for them to respond by saying yes or no to any of the options that you present.
That's excellent. So this point was provide a list of options for the supervisor to choose from. You know what else that shows besides creativity or thought? Also, like that you are like really focused on the office and what it needs. So that says more about you than simply the fact that you're good at providing options, like 1, 2, 3, or whatever. So that's great. Yes.
I worked a bunch of jobs. Almost none of them had actual proper orientation. I worked in construction, waitering, McDonald's, and all of those ones you can. From what I figured out, the greatest way to just do something that you don't know is do something to your best ability, and then just ask someone immediately, "Did I do this right?" Before, I don't know if I was like handing something out to a customer, or if I was about to make something like help with siding.
Great. So like ask for feedback. Did I do this right? Maybe to a coworker.
Yeah.
And that's a really good way to find out if you're doing things the way they should be done. Or to get feedback.
Yeah, and
Great.
I think that you should do something and then ask right before it's permanent.
Mhm.
That way you're at least doing something, and then if you do something wrong, then they can show you, but at the minimum, you're not asking them before you start something.
That's great. Yeah. So for example, if it were an email that you're sending to a vendor or to some other outside party, maybe before you send it, you could
Draft an email, say,
does this make sense?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. And then on the in the chat, you can send your supervisor an email so they can respond to it at their own convenience. You could ask someone else in the office. Exactly. You could briefly explain the situation to your supervisor and ask them to direct you to a coworker. Certainly. Again, sometimes like these answers, you might be thinking, it seems really kind of like practical. It makes sense. But when someone is, let's put it this way, if someone's in a situation where they're really unsure and uncertain, they might not be comfortable even asking questions. So some of you seem like you would be able to, but it's not always the case. All right, so let's go through number 4 now. You consider yourself an intelligent person, but you do not possess thorough knowledge about using some of the computer software and office devices necessary for your job. Apart from asking your supervisor or other employees, can you think of a solution to this situation? Okay, so here we're not going to ask for help from another person. So what can we figure out on our own or in a different set? That's the question.
most likely jobs have courses that you can get trained to do.
Mhm.
I mean, most jobs have some sort of training. If they don't, you can just train yourself.
What would you do? How would you tackle it?
I don't know, I agree. Work on one different job. Already been my dream job, I didn't know what to do.
Well, no, you just have to learn something new and very excited for something. Because it's reading instruction manual, so.
I mean, if you consider yourself an important person.
So like online, like YouTube videos or like learning or Google search.
So.
All right. Why don't we start? Let's start with the room first. So I think I heard some of the same things we see in the chat about using certain tools, which is spot on. There's sort of a I'm gonna add on a complication to it. Not really a complication, but a factor that might hinder that. Do we have about? Do you have an example of what you would where you go?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So watching a video on Google. Now, a number of people came up with something like that, right? YouTube, I see ChatGPT, and doing research on your own. Now, again, this might seem like another obvious answer, right? You're an intelligent person, so you can think of a solution. But do you know many people who actually go on LinkedIn Learning and things like that and just sort of like systematically teach themselves how to do things? I mean, realistically, do you do it? So there's a difference between like knowing what to do and actually doing it. So that's sort of that's the hindrance that I see. It's like sometimes on our own, we're not going to take an action, but we need someone else. Now, in this case, we weren't going to bother the supervisor, right? Or another employee. Is there another person who could be an inspiration?
I mean, I think that at least from my sister's from my sister's experience, she is like an engineer and she needed to learn the new software for her new job after graduating, and the job had like courses and resources to learn programs.
Okay, so she had the initiative to do it herself.
Yeah, but the job also provided them, or at least resources around it.
So they made it easy. What about I mean, I'm trying to think of another situation. We all know that, right? Getting enough sleep, exercise, eating well is important for a healthy life, but sometimes that's hard to follow. Are there any, what helps us to do those things outside of ourselves, besides like the fact that those things exist? It's like, who's someone who influences your behavior besides your supervisor or coworker, would you say? Anybody? Yeah.
Who's a friend? It's someone else.
Like a friend. Yeah. And can you think, not to put you on the spot, can you think of a specific example where that's happened for you successfully?
Like even like right now, like learning languages especially and like bouncing that off other people. So like having conversations with other people is way easier and more fun and quicker to do than just like reading through stuff and just doing it by yourself because
Okay.
You have the other person that was also going through the same experience as you are.
Great, thanks. That's a good example. So in case you couldn't hear it, so having someone else to talk to about a subject, let's say learning languages, can be a much faster and effective way of understanding something or learning something than just reading about it. I thoroughly agree. I actually think one-on-one conversations might be the single best way to learn about a topic. All right. You've done good work and we're almost through. We're on number 5 now. By chance, one day in the office, you see another worker walk into the supply room and walk out with a stack of pens and notebooks. You know that they are not doing a presentation anytime soon and conclude that they are stealing the materials. Should you do anything in response? If so, what? Is it your job to be the office police person, cop? No? So do you just pretend you didn't see it? Maybe you didn't see what you thought you saw. I don't know. What could somebody do in response? Why don't we let's do this quickly. So just anybody yell out if there's something that you think of.
Don't snitch.
Don't snitch. Okay, that's one's value. Okay, just
But-
ask the person directly. Yeah,
But on a community.
right. It's like, oh, hey, why do you have 30 pens? So it's not your job, but you can find someone whose job it is and let them know. Unless there's a shortage of those things, it is a burden financially on the company, or it seems to be happening a lot, I wouldn't say anything. So if it's not like a huge issue, yes.
I wouldn't say anything unless someone there saw it and asked like publicly about it, if anyone else saw anything.
Okay, so you would come forward if there was a request for.
Like if someone knew where they.
Okay, got it. Yeah. So this is the kind of thing, maybe this is like not exactly the situation you face yourself in, but this is one of those ethical dilemmas that often actually are something you have to deal with in the workplace. Do we have another? It could be a different story if the individual who is stealing saw you and only you nearby. Then they would know it was you who snitched. I guess that's true, isn't it?
Never.
All right. Last one. We're almost there. You've been on the job for 2 months and are feeling more and more settled in. You enjoy your coworkers and are learning many things that are new to you. It seems perfect. There is one problem. To keep up with the workload, remember the staffing shortage, you have been taking work home and as a result are often tired. You worry that you might burn out. What could you do to address this? And yeah, you could talk to your supervisor. Okay, so I'm going to take that one away as an obvious one. What else could you do to address the burnout situation?
Find a new job. If you've been on the job for 2 months and are already burned out, there's a staffing shortage. More people are looking for work. Go find a different job that doesn't stress you out as much.
Okay, excellent. Get a different job. It used to be we tell people to stay in a job for a year, even if you didn't like it, because then you'd have a year of experience and then it would be less of an issue. More and more, we're seeing people leave jobs sooner than a year. And there's various reasons. But if you're absolutely miserable, probably not a reason to stay in a job. Now, what if you still think that you want to stay in this job? What could you possibly do?
I don't know if there's much to do other than like talking to the supervisor or the boss about hiring on more people, but I guess maybe like HR. Say, hey, we have a staffing issue. I'm overburdened. I'm doing more than I
Okay,
was entitled.
so you talk to HR, human resources, and see if they can address it. All right.
Ask for a raise if I'm doing more than what was expected.
Ask for a raise. That's another possibility. What about, here's a thought that I had. What about just saying, you know what? I work hard. I do a good job. I tried talking to my supervisor. They seem to listen to a point, but not entirely. I'm just going to take care of myself. I'll do what I can do, but I'm not taking work home. What about that? Is that realistic? Maybe it might have some repercussions, but maybe that's what you have to do as well. So there's varying degrees of like how much you put up with or don't, and then solutions that you come up with. All
Can I
right.
ask a follow-up question? What would be a solution if you're working hybrid and it's like an at-home work day and it's your normal schedule is 9 to 5 and it's past 5 and you're still working on a project? How do you make sure you hit that kind of hard stop time so you're not burning yourself out?
Mhm.
Personal accountability? So would you like set a reminder? How would you?
If I'm scheduled to work 9 to 5 and I'm not getting paid overtime, I'm not gonna.
Shut it down.
I'm shutting it down, like hard stop.
Okay.
Am I getting paid salary or hourly? Probably salary, right?
Yeah,
Depends on the
and I was
position.
thinking that for this salary.
This one's salary?
That's what I was thinking.
Depends how much the salary is.
But there's also the argument, no matter if you might be making a really, really huge salary, and if you're miserable, is that even worth it? At a certain point, it's not worth it, but I would think, anyway. And set healthy limits for time, do your best in that time limit, and talk to your supervisor if they bring it up. So that was mentioned. rework your work-life balance, go to supervisor HR, communicate the fact that work expectations are nowhere near reasonable for the hours you work. Yeah, and you know what? The result could be they fire you, or that they don't help you, but sometimes that's the price to pay, actually, I would argue. It's not what we want to happen, but sometimes things happen, and that's all that we can do about them. Listen, everyone, thank you for joining us. Now, if you need to leave, fully understand it. If you have further questions or you want to go over some specific topic in detail, we can do that right now, both with the online and in person. I know that there were some questions that people wanted us to cover. Did we go over most of them?
Think so. Do you mind speaking a bit more to maybe how workplace culture has changed in hybrid and like
Oh.
so you're talking about,
Yeah.
communicating with colleagues and that sort of thing, but maybe how it's changed.
Yeah. This is a great question. So how has workplace culture changed in the hybrid work environment? I was telling a colleague today, in the early pandemic, summer of 2020, I was working in my house and we were doing things like recording webinars. And I had this feeling, I looked out the window and I was like, I was kind of lost. I didn't know where I was in a sense. I mean, yeah, I knew I was in my house, but like I didn't have any kind of like grounding to something that was familiar to me. It was the weirdest feeling. And it made me feel really kind of alone in a sense. And so I think we need to be aware that for some people, this hybrid working environment is really hard. For other people, it's perfect because it gives them a little bit of sociability, a little bit of privacy and alone time. But for other people, it doesn't work very well. I'm thinking about people who need to be around others when they're working. Maybe they can't focus, or it's too quiet, it's too alone. And so this question about how is the hybrid work culture, how has it changed things? I think it's made people think about what matters to them, and in some cases they're quitting. People will just up and quit. I've spoken to a lot of people, just like friends, neighbors, some of whom retired, maybe early retirement, which of course depends on having financial security. So there are certain limitations to what you can do. Other people have switched careers. They've gone back to school or learned new skills that would enable them to work in a different field. In particular, I think of people who have decided to switch to coding, computer coding, and went to like a boot camp to learn that and to try to pursue work there. So I guess that's what I would say there. Is there anybody online who had any other topic or question?
Kind of. So how can you, like, if you're having an internship during school, what can you do to explore whether this field is right for you? Like being in that workplace kind of is like
so if you're having an internship,
professional.
Yeah, what can you do to explore or figure out whether that place is
in the field, in general, is a good fit for you?
A good fit. Well, I would say observe what you see in the office or in the work setting. And do you see people respecting each other? Do you see challenge and interest that you think will keep you occupied? And maybe also, there's anybody here been on Glassdoor? Certainly there's plenty of ratings about workplaces. Now you have to be a little careful to take them at face value, but when you have hundreds of ratings and people state that there's something about this workplace that's either positive or negative, usually that's an indication. But I would say trust your own instincts and what your experience has been as to whether or not this place is worth staying, after the internship. Oh, one final thing, I promised, I told you I used Chat GPT for this, for this session. What I used it for was like, what advice do you have for someone like a new employee, someone starting a new job, starting a career? And so there's a lot of different things that came up, including things like professionalism, learn continuously, communication skills, build strong relationships. So we'd expect many of you talked about those things. Ethical conduct. There's a couple though, and work-life balance. There are a couple others. Clarify expectations. I think that came up in the one about being working from home. And stay positive. Maintain a positive attitude even when facing challenges. A positive outlook can help you persevere and maintain good relationships with colleagues. So I would kind of step into this one a little bit and say, yeah, stay positive as much as you can. But if you're in a negative, like a bad situation, I think that's important to address it too. And it might mean quitting the job. It really might, if it's that bad. So, there's different levels, I would argue. And we hope that things wouldn't get to that place. And maybe you can avoid getting to that place, building a strong relationship with your supervisor and building the strong communication skills. Thank you all for attending. And I'm here for a few more minutes if you have any other questions, but we will conclude our session now. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah. And there were some folks in the chat, I'll just mention this to you all too, on Thursday at 1 p.m. on Zoom. Our colleagues are hosting a how to find part-time employment workshop with AUHR. So it's a joint presentation. So if you're looking for on-campus, off-campus jobs, it's a good little workshop. And then starting next week, all of our job and internship fair prep events begin. So hopefully we will see you all there. Thanks for coming.
Okay.
Bye all.
Good night. Thanks for coming in. Thank you. So many more online. I guess that makes